Millionaire thought it was just a contract. Date. Until she said, "You don't recognize me, do you?" Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have one small request. Please click the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you will not miss our newest videos. It only takes a second. It is completely free. And it is the best way to support us in bringing you more heartfelt, meaningful stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Tell us your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much. Some meetings are signed on paper. Others are written by fate. Let us return to our main character. Julian Ward never believed in coincidences. For him, everything in life could be calculated from market shifts to emotions. Even his presence tonight was a business decision. His PR manager had called it a contract date. Just a formality, she said. A woman who can keep up appearances at the charity gala. No strings, no stories. So here he was, at Le Grand Lumière, a restaurant of mirrored walls and low amber lights, where expensive silence wrapped around each table. Julian glanced at his watch, polished silver under the candlelight. Efficiency was his armor. He hated wasted time. Then she walked in. Ava Lang, though he did not know her name yet, crossed the room with quiet confidence. She wore a simple dark green dress, and her hair was tied back, letting the soft light touch her face. No diamonds, no performance. Just calm grace. "Mr. Ward," she greeted, her voice steady but kind. He stood, extending a polite handshake. "Thank you for coming. Let's discuss the terms?" She smiled faintly, her eyes holding something he could not define. "How about tonight? We skip the terms. No thrones, no titles, just a man and a woman having dinner." It disarmed him more than any negotiation ever had. The waiter poured wine. Conversation began not about business, but about people. Ava asked what inspired his first company. He almost said profit margins, but her gaze stopped him. He found himself saying instead, "Curiosity. I wanted to fix what others gave up on." Her smile widened. "Then you still believe in second chances?" He was not sure why that struck him so deeply. Instead, she reached into her bag and handed him a small, well-worn book. "For you," she said. He opened it, a collection of poems, her handwriting along the margins. One page was marked with a ribbon. "Page 47, she said quietly. "The barista's dream." He turned to it. The words were simple, but they held the weight of everything unspoken between them: regret, forgiveness, and something that might still be hope. Ava laid it over the back of her chair, the soft texture catching the glow of the candles. "Strange," she said quietly. "You do not remember me at all, do you?" He froze, the question slicing through the ease of the night. "I'm sorry," he said after a moment, honest confusion clouding his voice. "Should I?" She looked down, her expression unreadable, yet not hurt, almost accepting. "Maybe not," she whispered. "But some memories never let go, even when people do." "Oh." For a second, he caught the faintest tremor in her tone. Something familiar, but from where? He could not place it. The clock behind them chimed softly, marking the end of their first hour together. He realized he had not checked his watch once since she arrived. When she lifted her glass, the green scarf caught the golden light again, soft, delicate, familiar in a way he could not name. Julian found himself watching her, not as a strategist sizing up an opponent, but as a man who felt something shift quietly inside. Their dinner plates had long been cleared, yet neither seemed in a hurry to leave. The restaurant's chatter faded into the sound of a violin playing somewhere near the bar. Ava rested her chin lightly on her hand. "You know," she said, her voice calm, "you talk about work as if it is the only language you speak." He gave a restrained smile. "Work is predictable. People are not." "Then maybe tonight," she replied gently, "you can learn another language." He did not answer, but his pulse betrayed him a flicker beneath his cuff. Outside, rain began to fall against the glass. The world beyond blurred, but inside, the air was warm, almost suspended. Ava looked toward the window, then back at him, eyes reflecting both distance and something like longing. Julian broke the silence, his tone lower now. "You seem to know me well for someone I just met." Her lips curved slightly, almost wistful. "Maybe I knew a different version of you." He frowned. "Different how?" "Less armored," she said softly. "More alive." He leaned back, unsettled, searching her face for an anchor. But her gaze held him there steady, patient, as if she was waiting for him to remember. The clock on the wall struck 9. The sound lingered like a quiet echo between them. Julian glanced at his untouched dessert, then at her scarf still draped across the chair. That same green like the campus gardens of his college years, like laughter he once thought he forgot. He inhaled slowly. "Ava," he began, but stopped, because saying her name felt dangerous, like opening a door he had locked long ago. She smiled tender, knowing. "It has been a long time, Julian." His heart stumbled in his chest. The air between them thickened with recognition, half memory, half disbelief. The night deepened, but inside Le Grand Lumière, time seemed to move slower, or perhaps Ava had simply altered its rhythm. Julian's phone buzzed twice beside his wine glass. She reached over, gently sliding it away from his reach. "You should taste this," she said, smiling faintly. "The chef uses fresh basil, it changes everything." He hesitated, almost amused. "You just took a billionaire's phone hostage." "Oh, only for an hour," she replied. "Let your senses earn their paychecks for once." He laughed under his breath. Yet somehow, he obeyed. He took the spoon, tasted the soup, and found it unexpectedly rich. Not because of the flavor, but because he was present enough to notice. For the first time in years, Julian Ward was not in a meeting, not approving a contract, not fighting to win. He was simply there. Their conversation drifted toward technology, his empire, the newest AI expansion in Singapore. But Ava kept redirecting him, like a gentle current turning a river. "That's incredible," she said softly. "But who does it help, really? The ones who can afford it or the ones who need it most?" Julian tilted his head. "You sound like someone who believes empathy can change data, and you sound like someone who forgot it once did," she countered, still smiling. He studied her, intrigued now. There was something disarming about her certainty, something too familiar in the way she saw through him. As the meal went on, she guided him back to smaller things, how his grandmother's cookies inspired his first algorithm for sensory recall, how his old neighborhood looked after the flood. Each mention unwrapped a piece of his buried humanity, one he had quietly negotiated away for success. Julian leaned in, his voice lower. "How do you know all this about me?" She took a sip of wine, her eyes not leaving his. "I read," she said, "and I remember." The pianist began playing an old jazz piece, Autumn in New York. Candlelight shimmered against her green scarf. And for a moment, he swore he could smell roasted coffee and rain. Ava reached into her purse and slid something across the table. A photograph, slightly faded, edges curled with time. He looked down, two people sitting in a cafe. His younger self, laughing. The girl beside him, a barista, eyes bright with dreams. "This was taken on your last day there," she said quietly. "You left before the lights went out. I stayed until they did." Julian's hand tightened around the photo. His breath caught that cafe, that day, that warmth he had buried beneath ambition. His voice barely rose above a whisper. "Amelia?" Her eyes softened, but she did not smile. "Yes, I was Amelia Tate." The air seemed to shift. The candle between them flickered as if recognizing the truth. He stared at her, the woman he had left to chase $1 million dream, now sitting before him as if time itself had folded back. She was different, her face wiser, her beauty quieter, her presence steadier. But the same deep kindness glowed beneath it all, the same quiet light he once mistook for fragility. Julian swallowed hard, guilt and awe colliding inside him. "I thought you vanished?" She finished gently. "You were the one who did." The scarf on her shoulder slipped slightly, catching the candlelight once more green, soft, and impossibly familiar. For the first time that evening, Julian had no strategy, no words. Only the sound of a piano, the taste of basil, and the ache of recognition blooming in his chest. That green, the color of a long-lost afternoon. The smell of memory. The proof that the past had a way of finding its way back. The restaurant had emptied, but neither of them moved. The city outside blurred into ribbons of golden rain, and for the first time in years, Julian Ward could not find the right words. Ava broke the silence first. Her tone was calm, not bitter, the kind of peace that only comes after surviving something that once hurt too much. "You left without a word," she said quietly. "No goodbye, No explanation. One morning, the chair across from me was just empty. Julian's jaw tightened. I thought I had to. The company was collapsing. I needed to choose, she finished for him. And you did. You chose power instead of a hand to hold. Her words were not a knife. They were a mirror. He looked into it and saw the man he had become successful, admired, and utterly alone. I was young, he said finally, and afraid of being ordinary. Ava's gaze softened. We all are, but ordinary love is the only thing that keeps us human. The clock ticked somewhere behind them. He realized she was not there to reopen the wound, only to show him what it had cost. I did not come to make you apologize, she added. I only wanted to see if the man who once dreamed beside me still existed. He looked at her, really looked this time past the elegance, past the distance. I think I lost him, he admitted, voice low. She nodded gently. Then maybe this is where you find him again. For a long while, neither spoke. The scarf on her shoulder moved slightly in the soft breeze from the open door green, like forgiveness learning how to breathe. Outside the restaurant, the night had deepened into mist and city light. Julian offered to drive her home, but instead, they ended up at the quiet bar of the street, Regis, a place where conversations lasted longer than intentions. Later that night, the city shimmered under soft rain. At the street, Regis bar, the lights were low, gold against glass, and the world outside seemed to fade into something quieter. Julian sat across from Ava, his tie loosened, the top button of his shirt undone, a rare surrender. She stirred her drink slowly, eyes tracing the swirl of amber liquid as if it held answers to questions neither of them had asked. Strange, she said softly. How noise can make silence louder. He gave a small, tired smile. I spend most days avoiding silence. It tends to ask questions I can't answer. Ava looked up at him, her expression steady but gentle. Then let me ask one. He nodded, cautious. Are you living, she said, or just running? The words hung between them, light, yet unbearably heavy. Julian froze. For a heartbeat, even the jazz band in the corner seemed to stop playing. His reflection in the glass looked older than he remembered, like a man trapped inside his own momentum. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Not denial, not defense, just the quiet panic of a man realizing he no longer knew what living meant. Ava's gaze softened. You used to dream about building things that helped people. You said it made you feel alive. I did, he said quietly. Then I learned it wasn't enough. To help them? To stay human. The honesty startled even him. Outside, a car passed, light spilling across their table for a brief second. Two silhouettes frozen between what was and what might still be. She leaned back, studying him. Maybe it's not too late to stop running. He exhaled, half a laugh, half a confession. If I stop, I'm not sure what's left. Maybe, she said. You'll find out. Her tone was simple, but something in it anchored him. For the first time in years, Julian wasn't thinking about profit margins or market shares, only the quiet gravity of a woman who once knew the boy he used to be. He glanced at her scarf again, the same muted green, resting gently against her collarbone. It caught the light like memory itself, and he thought, perhaps happiness isn't a destination. Maybe it's the courage to sit still long enough to feel something again. When she smiled at him, the air seemed to lift. The noise of the bar returned, but it felt softer, kinder, almost forgiving. Julian looked down at his untouched drink. He still had no answer to her question, but for the first time, he wanted one. They left the bar when the city had fallen quiet, that tender hour when even ambition seemed tired. The car ride was slow, the streets glimmering with rain. Between them hung the kind of silence that wasn't empty, only full of thought. Ava turned toward him, her voice soft, almost reflective. Do you know why I started teaching writing? Julian glanced at her. Because you loved it? She smiled faintly. Because it saved me. One of my students once told me she found her first breath through words. I think I did too. Her tone carried warmth, the kind that made the air feel human again. Julian kept his eyes on the road, but every word pressed into him like a quiet confession. He said, almost to himself, I built a company to prove I could not be replaced. I wake up every morning afraid someone younger, faster, smarter will take my place. Though, Ava's eyes lingered on him, not judging, just seeing. So you fear being replaced, she said. More than you fear losing yourself. He didn't respond right away. His hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. The truth of her words landed with a quiet, painful grace. At a red light, he looked at her. What does it feel like to teach people to breathe again? She thought for a moment. It feels like reminding them they're more than their achievements. Maybe that's something you've forgotten. He let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. You think I've forgotten how to be human? Ava shook her head gently. Not forgotten, just outsourced it. That made him laugh, a low, genuine sound, the kind that came from somewhere deep and unguarded. When they reached her building, she turned to him before stepping out. Try this, she said. For one day, stop being the billionaire. Just be the man. Her hand rested lightly on the car door, her gaze steady. You might be surprised who you find underneath. Julian nodded, but words failed him. He watched her walk away, the green scarf brushing against the wind, a small piece of the past moving further into the night. He stayed parked for a long time, engine running, eyes unfocused. The city around him pulsed with light and distance, yet everything felt sharper, her voice, her laughter, the way she looked at him, not as a name, but as a person. Back home, the penthouse felt like an echo. He loosened his tie and sat by the window, replaying the evening in his mind. Ava's sentences circled through his head not as words, but as reminders. About living, about breathing. About stopping the endless race toward nothing. He looked at his reflection in the glass. A man surrounded by everything, missing something invisible. The thought came softly. Maybe tomorrow, I will try. And for the first time in years, Julian Ward fell asleep, not thinking about deals or deadlines, but about a woman who taught people to breathe and the strange, healing sound of his own heart remembering how. As sleep began to blur her thoughts, one quiet truth surfaced above all, somewhere between her words and her smile. Perhaps he had fallen in love with her all over again. The next morning, Julian woke before the Sunday. The city outside was still gray, but his thoughts were already restless, filled with the sound of her laughter, the way her eyes caught the light when she talked about words and breathing and life. He didn't even bother to check his phone. Meetings, contracts, the endless noise they could wait. For the first time in years, something else mattered more. He canceled his entire day, got in the car, and drove east toward Sag Harbor. The highway stretched wide and open, but his pulse was unsteady, caught somewhere between eagerness and disbelief. When he arrived, the seaside air greeted him like a memory. That place, the calm of water, the slow rhythm of wind, felt like the world Ava belonged to. He sent her a message. Dinner tonight. I'll cook. She replied with a single word. Brave. By the time the sun began to dip, the house smelled faintly of rosemary and garlic. Julian had not cooked in over a decade, but the clumsy rhythm of chopping and tasting felt strangely liberating. He had spent years commanding people. Tonight, he wanted only to create something simple, something human. Ava arrived just as the horizon turned gold. Her hair shimmered in the low light, and the green scarf from that first evening hung loosely around her shoulders. You actually did it, she said, amused. He smiled, a little sheepishly. Don't sound so surprised. I'm impressed, she said. Most men in suits only know how to order food, not make it. They worked together in the small kitchen, passing spoons, stealing glances, laughing when the sauce splattered. It wasn't the noise of a dinner party, but the quiet intimacy of two people rediscovering the rhythm they once shared. As the first candles were lit, they carried their dishes to the terrace. The sky was washed in shades of coral and violet, the ocean whispering below. For a moment, Julian just watched her. The breeze lifted a strand of her hair, and something inside him, something long asleep, stirred awake. His heart tripped, then steadied, then raced again. Every time she spoke, it danced. Every time she smiled, it quieted. He had not felt that kind of peace in years, the kind that frightened and healed at once. You always liked the sea, he said softly. Ava nodded. It listens better than people do. He looked at her for a long time, the candlelight reflecting in his eyes. I used to think love was a distraction, he murmured. Now, I'm starting to think it's the only thing that keeps us real. Ava didn't answer. They sat in silence after that, the waves whispering below, the scent of salt and candle wax mixing in the air. Julian glanced at her again. The last light of day touched her face, and for the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a life that wasn't measured in success, but in shared, quiet moments like this. When she smiled at him across the table, he felt it not just in his chest, but everywhere his heart had been asleep. The fire in the old stone fireplace crackled softly, throwing small shadows against the walls of the beach house. Dinner plates sat empty, the scent of lemon and rosemary still lingering between them. Outside, the sound of the tide folded into the quiet, rhythmic, patient, eternal. Ava looked at him across the flickering light. "If that night," she said slowly, "you hadn't turned left instead of right, would we have been different?" Julian's gaze held hers. The question landed somewhere deep, stirring something he had kept locked away for decades. He leaned back, the firelight tracing the faint tiredness around his eyes. "I used to think the turn I took was the only path forward," he said. "I traded peace for glory, thinking they were the same thing. I built towers, awards, headlines, but every one of them took me further from myself, and from you." Ava smiled faintly, not with triumph, but with understanding. "Maybe we all take the wrong road first, so that we know what home feels like when we find it again." He studied her, really studied her, the curve of her smile, the calm in her posture, the quiet power she carried now. "You're not the same woman I left," he said. She shook her head gently. "No. I had to become someone else. After you left, everything I believed in collapsed. I couldn't breathe being Amelia Tate anymore. So I changed my name. I became Ava, a version of me who could start over without the ache." Julian's voice dropped, almost breaking. "And does Ava still love what Amelia did?" A pause. The sound of the waves filled the space between them. "Ava learned to forgive her," she said softly, "because forgiving her was the only way to stop blaming you." He looked down, his hands clasped together. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, almost unconsciously, his hand reached across the table, finding hers. Her fingers were warm, steady. The world outside seemed to still, as if listening. "I will change," Julian said quietly. "Not to keep you, not to rewind the years, but to be the man you once believed I could be." Ava's eyes glistened, not from sadness, but from something deeper recognition. "Then maybe," she said, "you've already started." The fire crackled again, the sound soft and alive. He turned their hands, fingers interlacing, like they had done in a different lifetime. "I never understood love," he admitted. "I thought it was a transaction effort in, reward out. But with you, it's just breath. It's being seen." She leaned slightly forward, the light tracing gold along her cheek. "You don't have to chase love, Julian. You only have to stop running from it." He smiled, faint but real. "Then I'll stop running." For a moment, neither spoke. The fire burned lower, soft embers pulsing like a heartbeat. Somewhere beyond the glass, the moon rose, silent and full. Julian's thoughts drifted not to the boardroom, not to deadlines or deals, but to the sound of her laughter against the rhythm of the waves. He squeezed her hand once, as if sealing something wordless between them. A promise, not of forever, but of honesty. Ava looked at him one last time before the night deepened. "We can't undo the years," she whispered, "but maybe we can start by living the ones ahead differently." He nodded. "We will." The last flame flickered, and in that brief light, the echo of his vow shimmered quiet, unbound, real. The unconditional promise glowing in silence, waiting for its return. Morning came dressed in silver fog and the soft hum of the sea. The world outside his window felt slower, as if even time hesitated to move. Julian hadn't slept. He had spent the night replaying the hours they'd shared, every word, every quiet pause that lingered like perfume in the air. Ava was leaving for France. 3 months, she said. Partly Paris, partly Provence, to finish her book, to breathe somewhere quieter than New York could ever be. When he arrived at her apartment, the cab was already waiting. Her suitcases stood by the door, neat and small, like the life of someone who had learned to travel light in luggage, not in heart. He stood there for a moment, unable to speak. She looked different in the morning light. Softer, peaceful. As though she had already stepped halfway into another world. "So, Provence?" he said finally, trying to sound casual. She smiled. And Paris. A few readings, some solitude. The mix I need. Julian's laugh was quiet. Solitude never really suited you. Neither did noise, she answered gently. But I learned to live between them. He nodded, searching her eyes for hesitation, any reason for her to stay. There wasn't one. As they drove toward the airport, the city fell away behind them, skyscrapers shrinking into haze, bridges glinting like threads of memory. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was heavy, thick with everything that didn't need to be said. At the terminal, he helped her with the last suitcase, fingers brushing hers just long enough for his chest to ache. I want to keep in touch, he said finally. Call sometimes. Send things. I don't know, just not let this vanish. Oh. Ava looked at him, her expression tender but firm. If, when I return, you're still the man you promised to become tonight, then call me. Julian swallowed, a half-smile breaking through the ache. I will be. Different, I mean. Not overnight, but every day, a little more. She reached up and straightened the collar of his coat, an intimate, familiar gesture that felt like both care and closure. Then that's all I needed to hear, she said softly. They stood there for a long moment, surrounded by the rhythm of departures, the hum of wheels, the echo of names over the intercom, the faint clatter of heels against polished floors. Do you ever get scared? He asked quietly. Of leaving again? Her lips curved in a small, sad smile. Always. But it's not leaving that scares me, Julian. It's not becoming. Then, before he could answer, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead lightly to his, a quiet benediction. Goodbye, she whispered. Or maybe, see you when you're ready. And with that, she stepped back, picked up her bag, and turned toward the gate. The crowd folded around her, and she was gone. Julian stood still until the last trace of her green scarf disappeared past security. Then he exhaled long, uneven, but calm. He walked outside into the open air, the morning sun breaking through low clouds, soft and gold. Sometimes, redemption isn't found in the act of holding on. It's found in the quiet work of becoming someone worthy of the moment she chooses to look back. The morning was still when Julian returned to Sag Harbor. The sea lay flat and pale under a sky that hadn't decided whether to rain or shine. He walked along the pier, coat open, the wind carrying the faint scent of salt and cedar, the scent that always reminded him of her. Ava had been gone for weeks, yet her presence lingered in the smallest things. The cup she used for tea, the folded scarf draped over the chair, the book she'd left behind. He ran his fingers along the worn spine of that book, remembered light, and turned to page 47. The words blurred for a moment, not from age, but from the quiet ache that came with remembering. He had promised her he would change, and he had begun. Meetings cut in half, deadlines pushed aside. The empire could run without him, and that was precisely why he had built it, so he could finally step away and build something real. That morning, he signed the papers transferring most of his holdings. He had chosen to return to the work that once made him dream renewable energy, sustainable design, the science that gave meaning beyond money, not for profit, but for purpose, something that could outlive him, and perhaps touch lives the way she once touched his. As the sun broke through the haze, Julian smiled faintly. For the first time in years, he wasn't running towards success or away from loss. He was simply standing still present, awake, alive. He closed the book and looked toward the ocean, where the light shimmered gold against the water. She thought it was just a date, he murmured, but she made me see again, not her, but myself. He picked up her scarf from the chair, the soft green fabric catching the wind like memory itself. And then his phone buzzed. A call. Unknown number. He hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Then came the faint sound of an arrival hall, muffled announcements, the hum of travelers, a voice he hadn't heard in months. Julian? The sound froze him in place. Her voice was different now, lighter, maybe, or simply freer. He turned toward the open sea, unable to stop the smile that broke across his face. Somewhere, a flight had just landed at Charles de Gaulle, and somewhere else, another one was boarding for New York. Welcome back, he whispered. The wind carried the words across the water, and the story of their second chance was just beginning. If you want to see what happens next, comment Part 2 and follow Valen's stories. where power learns to love again. So we'll bring you the next chapter as soon as it's ready. Thank you for watching.